Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good 4th of July holiday. I have a few things to pass along at the top, and then I'll be happy to take your questions. As I highlighted last week, July 1 was the 50th anniversary of the all-volunteer force. To commemorate this important milestone, Secretary Austin traveled yesterday to Fort Meade, Maryland, to preside over an enlistment ceremony for 85 new recruits at the Baltimore Military Entrance Processing Station, and to welcome them into the U.S. military. As the Secretary highlighted, these recruits arrived at Fort Meade as individuals, but left as part of a team. To quote Secretary Austin, quote, "America's all-volunteer force is the strongest military in human history, and the power of today's military is a testament to every American patriot who freely volunteers to keep our republic safe," end quote. In other news, Secretary Austin conducted separate phone calls today with several of his counterparts, to include Philippines Secretary of National Defense Gilberto Teodoro Jr., Ukrainian Minister of Defense Oleksiy Reznikov, and Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant. During his call with Philippines Secretary of National Defense Teodoro, Secretary Austin congratulated him on his new position and discussed ongoing efforts to strengthen the U.S.-Philippines alliance. The two leaders celebrated the remarkable progress the United States and Philippines have made over the past year to deepen defense ties, including expanding cooperation under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, conducting joint patrols in the South China Sea, and concluding bilateral defense guidelines. A full readout of the call is available on the DoD website. In regards to his calls with Minister Reznikov and Minister Gallant, we'll provide readouts as soon as they're available later today on defense.gov. On the travel front, Secretary Austin will depart Monday to travel to Vilnius, Lithuania, as a member of the President's team participating in the NATO summit. The summit is scheduled for July 11 through 12, after which the Secretary will return to the U.S. Separately, Deputy Secretary Hicks is on travel in the Indo-Pacific region this week, where she met yesterday with Admiral Aquilino and Indo-PACOM staff in Hawaii to discuss progress on implementing the National Defense Strategy, and observed experiments involving the Joint All-Domain Command and Control System, or JADC2. Today, the Deputy Secretary is scheduled to visit Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard and meet with service members there. Turning briefly to operations, yesterday, U.S. Navy Central Command announced that U.S. forces prevented 2 attempted commercial tanker seizures by the Iranian Navy after the Iranians opened fire against one of the tankers near the coast of Oman. Additional details regarding NowThis response are available on their website. Notably, both of these incidents occurred in international waters and represent a pattern of behavior by the Iranians. Since 2021, Iran has harassed, attacked, or seized nearly 20 internationally flagged merchant vessels, presenting a clear threat to regional maritime security and the global economy. Beginning in May, the United States increased the rotation of ships and aircraft patrolling the Strait of Hormuz, with partners following the uptick in Iranian merchant vessel seizures. As demonstrated by NowThis response yesterday, the increased force presence supports multinational efforts under the International Maritime Security Construct and bilaterally with partner nations to deter threats to commercial shipping and reassure regional mariners. The United States will continue to respond to Iranian aggression together with our global allies and our partners in the Middle East region, to ensure the freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz and other vital waterways. And finally, this weekend, U.S. Army Pacific will kick off Exercise Hanuman Guardian, a military-to-military exercise with the Royal Thai Army, which will run through July 22nd. The exercise seeks to build both capacity and interoperability with our Thai partners in the Indo-PACOM theater. The exercise offers tactical training at the battalion level, bilateral long-range fighters training, and exchange subject matter expertise on medical, counter-improvised explosive devices, and aviation operations. For more information on the exercise, I'd refer you to U.S. Army Pacific Public Affairs. With that, I'll take your questions. We'll start with AP. Tara.
Hi, General Ryder. Thanks for doing this. The AP is reporting that President Biden has decided to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine. How has the Pentagon been able to address concerns about dud rates that can put civilians, children at risk? And how will these munitions help Ukraine in this stage of the fight?
Sure. So in terms of DPICMs, I don't have anything to announce today, Tara. As you know, that is something that is under consideration. I will say that we have multiple variants of DPICMs in our stocks. and the ones that we are considering providing would not include older variants with dud rates that are higher than 2.35%. We are aware of reports out there from several decades ago that indicate that certain 155 millimeter DPICMs have higher dud rates, so we would be carefully selecting rounds with lower dud rates for which we have recent testing data.
And given that the Secretary is headed to Vilnius soon, what sort of outreach has he had with NATO partners to address their concerns about the use of cluster munitions in this conflict?
Again, I don't have anything specific to announce today in terms of DPICMs. If and when the decision is made, certainly we'll provide more information as appropriate. I will say this in terms of our allies and our partners. Unity continues to remain very strong when it comes to supporting Ukraine and providing them with the capabilities that they need to be effective on the battlefield.
But has he had any conversations with some of the Ukraine group partners, NATO allies?
Yeah, I don't have anything to read out today. Jennifer.
General Ryder, what can you tell us about these incidents with the how close were they? And these incidents, you sent F-22, an F-22 squadron out to the Middle East to deter these kind of incidents. It's clearly not deterring the Russians. What's next?
Yeah, I know that AFCENT did provide a statement on this that highlighted 3 MQ-9 drones were conducting a mission against ISIS targets. 3 Russian fighter jets began harassing those drones using things like parachute flares to drop in front of them, as well as 1 aircraft engaging its afterburner. Clearly meant to harass and clearly unprofessional and unsafe behavior on the part of the Russians. You've heard us say before that our focus in Syria is purely on the defeat ISIS mission, and so that will continue to be our focus. Like AFCENT, we call on the Russian forces to cease this type of reckless behavior and to behave like professional airmen.
Can you confirm that there were also 2 French Rafale planes that were approached by Russian warplanes unsafely this afternoon?
I don't have any information on that.
And just on the Iranian incidents with the naval vessels, today there was, the Iranians overtook a commercial vessel. What can you tell us about that? And the Iranians say that yesterday they had a warrant to seize one of the oil tankers that they were trying to approach when the USS McFall got involved.
Yeah, so my understanding on today's incident is that according to NAVCENT, there was doubt in terms of the operational activities of this commercial vessel, the potential that it was illegally smuggling oil, and so did not feel the need to respond in this particular case to that incident, as compared to yesterday where these 2 commercial oil tankers both hailed, requested assistance, both unprovoked, in terms of the attack from Iran. In one case, as I highlighted, firing upon those vessels. So we're going to continue to work very closely with our partners in the region to step up those patrols and ensure that we can deter aggressive behavior like that.
And your reaction to Iran
I
saying,
gotta go move
yeah,
on
but but you didn't answer my question, which was about the warrant that they said they had to seize the
Yeah, I mean, clearly the information that Iran has put out is inaccurate. So I think their record speaks for itself. Let me go to Oren.
On Monday, Marine Corps Commandant will retire and General Smith will take over in an acting capacity. What message does it send to U.S. adversaries like Russia and China that the U.S. military will not have confirmed officers at its highest levels? And then I have one more.
Well, as you've heard Secretary Austin and other officials say previously, the continuing hold on general officer, flag officer nominations will have an effect on military readiness given the potential second and third order effects. As you know, Oren, a key principle of effectiveness in our military is a well-defined chain of command, so uncertainty about incoming or outgoing commanders and senior leaders can make it difficult to plan for or advance mission requirements. And so additionally, by design, our force management is predicated on up or out. So as promotions stagnate, it prevents lower tiers from being promoted into key positions. creating a domino effect. So ultimately, this also has an impact on the families and the service members awaiting updates regarding new assignments, which then gets into questions about things like housing, schools, other aspects associated with the move. So obviously, from a uniform military standpoint, we'll continue to focus on the mission at hand. But as the Secretary has highlighted, it will have and can have readiness impacts.
And then one more question. Last week, CENTCOM launched a 15-6 into the May 3rd drone strike that may have killed a civilian, but results of the Civilian Casualty Credibility Assessment Report recommending that 15-6 were known a month earlier. Does the Secretary think it's appropriate that it took a month between the recommendation for a 15-6 and the official sign-off launching the 15-6? Is that an okay timeline?
So look, as you highlight, CENTCOM is conducting an investigation. The Secretary is confident in the process by which we manage investigations. I'll leave it to CENTCOM to speak about the timelines, but that investigation is underway. And when there are results to provide, certainly, I'd refer you to CENTCOM to be able to do that. Thank you very much. Let me go to Janie.
Thank you, General. I have two questions on China. The Pentagon has announced that it will stop funding to U.S. and university if a university received the support from the Chinese Confucius Institute. Can you elaborate more about this?
Sure. So the FY 2021 NDAA specified that starting this October, the Department of Defense is prohibited from funding any U.S. institution of higher education hosting a Confucius Institute unless it applied for a waiver from the Secretary of Defense. And for those that don't know what a Confucius Institute is, in August 2020, the State Department designated the Confucius Institute U.S. Center as a foreign mission of the People's Republic of China, recognizing it as an entity advancing Beijing's global propaganda and malign influence campaign on U.S. campuses and K-12 classrooms. And so the law requires that DoD establish an initiative to work with academic institutions that perform DoD research to ascertain whether foreign entities are using foreign talent programs to access U.S. technology and intellectual property. And we are required under this legislation to publish on a public website a list of foreign entities with problematic characteristics or behaviors. We're finalizing that detailed list at this time, and we'll announce it when at the appropriate time.
Does the U.S. see China as a competitor or an adversary?
I think our national defense strategy makes that very clear. We view them as a competitor and they're a pacing challenge. Let me go ahead and move to the phone here. Be remiss. Let me go to Jim Laporta, the messenger.
Hi, thanks for doing this. On cluster munitions, you talked about the dud rate. John Kirby in December of 2022 also talked about, that the U.S. as a policy has concerns about, cluster munitions being used. Besides the dud rate, what are the other concerns that the U.S. would have if these munitions are transferred to Ukraine? Thanks.
Well, I appreciate the question, Jim. Again, I don't want to get out ahead of any potential announcement. I think that, if and when a decision is made, we'll have more to say on that. All right, let me go to Idris from Reuters.
Separate from any decision or non-decision on the cluster munitions, last month, Laura Cooper said that there were issues with congressional restrictions and concerns from allies. Have those concerns been allayed, and have those congressional restrictions been overcome right now? Again, separate from any decision or non-decision, have those hurdles been overcome as we speak today?
Yeah, thanks, Idris. And again, not to be obtuse here, but because the DPICMs are under consideration, when and if we have an announcement to make, we'll be able to provide more details in terms of the process to include the coordination on that front. But until a decision has been made and something's been announced, I just don't want to get ahead of that process. All right, let me go back to the room here. Let me go to Fadi and then come over here.
Thank you, General. So I'm not going to talk about the decision, but I'm going to talk about the process of consideration of these munitions. When did the Pentagon and the White House National Security Council start thinking about these as a potential aid for Ukraine? And is this process of consideration related to any difficulties Ukrainians are facing in this counteroffensive? And is it meant, if a decision is made, to help them address some of these difficulties?
Yeah, let me just kind of break your question into two parts here. So in the first part, I don't have a timeline to provide you. As you know, throughout the course of this conflict, we've had regular discussions with the Ukrainians, regular discussions with our allies and partners in terms of what are the kinds of capabilities that Ukraine needs on the battlefield. As I highlighted at the top here, DPICMs are a capability that is under consideration. While I'm not going to get into the specifics of those discussions, I think what DPICMs bring to a battlefield is anti-armor and anti-personnel capability. So essentially, it can be either loaded with shape charges, which are armor penetrating, or they can be loaded with fragmentary munitions, which are anti-personnel. So clearly a capability that would be useful in any type of offensive operations. I would note that the Russians have already been employing cluster munitions on the battlefield, many with which include a very high dud rate reportedly. And so, yeah, let's just leave it at that. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Pat. I wanted to ask you about a response you made last week, and I'll refresh your memory. It was a question asked by a colleague about why some of the African countries may want to use the Wagner Group as a security force, and you said at the end, I can't speak for why someone would want to hire a transnational criminal organization to provide their security. I wasn't at that briefing, and I apologize, so my question is clarification. That phrase, transnational criminal organization, did you use it in just specifically regarding Wagner?
Yeah, State Department, the U.S. government has.
Wagner.
Yeah, correct.
No other. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, let me go back to the phone here. Jeff Shogel, Task and Purpose.
Thank you very much. The Consolidated Appropriation Acts of 2010 and 2019 prevent the Defense Department from transferring or selling cluster munitions to any nation if the dud rate is above 1%. I believe you said the dud rate that of the munitions being considered is 2.35%. So do these two acts prevent the transfer of DPICM to Ukraine, and how is DoD verifying that the dud rate on these munitions is 2.35%?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Again, if and when announcement is made, we'll have more detail to provide on that front. As I mentioned before, in the event that we do provide this capability, we would be carefully selecting rounds with low dud rates for which we have recent testing data, including as recently as 2020. All right, let me go to Tony Capaccio, Bloomberg.
Hi, Pat. I have a non-cluster munitions question. You started out the briefing talking about the 50th anniversary of the all-volunteer force. Later this month marks the 75th anniversary of the desegregation of the armed forces. For the record, to help reporters and everybody else understand this later in the month, can you get the statistics on how many African Americans are in the military overall, and then by service? That would be really a helpful metric.
Yes, Tony, we can get that for you, for the group here. Thank you. All right, got time for a few more. Let me go to Chris.
The Russian Ministry of Defense on the drone incident over Syria said they were conducting joint drills, the Russians and the Syrians, over northern Syria, and that the U.S. aircraft were violating the airspace. And a Russian Ministry of Defense official said the Russian side bears no responsibility for the safety of flight of unmanned aerial vehicles, which were not agreed with the Russian side. So was the U.S. Violating deconfliction protocols, or
did you see the video?
Well, but did the U.S. drone go into an area that was deconflicted with the Russians per the protocol?
Look, I think AFCENT's statement speaks for itself in terms of the type of unprofessional activity that we're seeing from these Russian aircraft, from these Russian pilots. Again, we have been in Syria for many years now fighting ISIS as part of an international coalition. That is no surprise to anyone. We have rules in place, that, well-established processes and procedures, and have very successfully deconflicted with the Russians over many years when it comes to safe operations in that region. So to suggest that somehow this is our fault, it's ridiculous. So okay, go to this gentleman right back here, and then we'll go ahead and close it out.
Thank you so much, General. Today there is another escalation in the Middle East at the border between Lebanon and Israel. So do you have any concerns that this kind of escalation could impact the stability of the region? And your opening statement, the Secretary Austin, he already talked with his Israeli counterpart. So would you give us more details about how concerns you have about that escalation? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. Well, as you've heard us say before, and we certainly support Israel's security and right to defend itself against terrorists, but we also feel that it's very important for all possible steps to be taken to protect civilians from harm. And so, again, we'll provide a readout of the Secretary's call here as soon as we can, but we again reconfirmed the Secretary reconfirmed with the Minister again that Israel is a close ally and a partner, and that we will remain in close contact. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.